I would like to just speak for a few minutes, kind of open-ended, on the situation in the United States right now. One of the issues I have to speak on first is I'm not a big believer in binary. I know that sounds silly to start this off with, but uh, obviously, and I've heard this, in the people say this, not all police officers are bad. Of course, everybody knows that. This idea that we have this 1-0 approach that they offer on good or bad, hot or cold, I think is really difficult right now for those of us with more moderate voices, which I believe I am. I'm sort of in the middle on many issues domestically. It's been difficult to discuss these kinds of things because I I don't like this idea that your responses here have to be throwing everybody into one wagon or another wagon. And I'm not a fan of that, into one bus or another bus. We've had several chances in the United States to turn things around in the areas of race. Um, Certainly after the Civil War, with the amendments that came through, and a lot of the attempts at Reconstruction of the South began so well, but then they didn't have the momentum to defeat things like institutional racism, of course, the Ku Klux Klan, the use of lynching and terrible things like that. I remember very well the Civil Rights Amendment being passed in 1964. It was a odd time in our home when my brother Ray was in Vietnam. And if you go back to the original act, you'll find it didn't have a lot of teeth. It was important, but it was going to take time to actually put in systems that would overcome institutionalized racism. And by the way, there is, and you can't not disagree with that completely. I mean, you can certainly raise your hand and say, oh, what about here and here? But all you need to do is look at the color barriers, as they were called in Major League Baseball. The sports I'm involved with tend to be less so. And when I used to teach, I used to always show the documentary of John Davis, the great weightlifter, who was black. He was African American, and very often people forget that he was actually the first person to clean and jerk 400 pounds. It's interesting how people like to push that aside with someone from this country who used to often exaggerate their lifts. Today, I think we've made more progress in about the last 2 weeks, from what I've seen, than we have in the past 50 years in a lot of ways. Some other corporations have responded by saying some very strange things online. In fact, my friend Mike Brown had to explain to me something called virtue signaling. He told me it was if it's when I post that I donated money to something. It's called virtue signaling, and only certain people, I guess, on the far right use that concept. But and then there was another example of someone saying something blatantly stupid and racist with another major fitness organization. It's been an odd couple of weeks. All I can say is remind everybody that we have a family motto: make a difference. And one of the things I've been trying to do during these times is to make a difference with, especially my treasury right now. I've been time, talent, treasures. I have been donating to especially people in the fitness industry who are supporting programs for Black Lives Matters. Many of my friends are working hard trying to make sure we don't forget the other aspect of being an American, is the poor health care that we have for many people in our society. And some of my friends are trying to make a difference there, and I'm right on them. Another thing you might not know is one of our family points is we believe in the absolute dignity of every human person, which I tell you, at times is difficult. I mean, there are times we always like to throw people into little boxes. I was talking to a friend of mine from Cairo the other day, and I was telling about my time in Cairo, where obviously I was other. I wasn't local. And the kindness and the caring that the people exhibited to me throughout every single day really reminds me how to live better in my life. But there's one other thing I'd like to talk about before we move on. There's a concept in the Catholic Church that isn't always done or isn't always celebrated, and I have to hold a lot of people in power positions accountable for this, but it's called the preferential option for the poor. Whenever you make a decision in any kind of group, one of the first things you think about, how will it impact the poor? And what we're supposed to do as administrators, we're supposed to do as teachers, supposed to do as everything, is when we come up to a decision, how will it impact the poor? We had this great series of workshops on it one year, and at the end of that year, the school I was at raised the tuition. The school I was at also made it very difficult for kids from the wrong side of the neighborhoods here to survive at the school. That's not preferential option for the poor. In a sense, to help the poor in America, to help a lot of people in America, we actually have to think more about, well, the best way I've ever heard explained, honestly, is in the Atkins diet. Dr. Atkins believed that if you had 30, 40, 50 years of carbs only, carbohydrates only, that you should take a 2-week period, his induction phase, where you shift the balance to no carbohydrates at all, to get things even again. Because if all you're doing is saying, everybody in America has the same opportunities, that's patently just not true. It's not. Now, certainly, my family, we were a poor family. I used to call us lower middle class, but then when I think about it, low middle class. But we also had a lot of advantages that a lot of you might not have had. Both my parents believed in education, believed in reading great books. I still have my mom's copy of the writings of Socrates and Plato. So to turn things around, sometimes you have to get unbalanced. Because if you give me the same amount that you give this person here and say that that's even, it's not. Because I already had some advantages. And an advantage I didn't even recognize until I began teaching is I had both parents in the home. And I didn't realize what an advantage that was until a couple of years into my teaching career. The preferential option of the poor reminds me that it is true that when someone says, if I say Black Lives Matter, someone's going to raise their hand and say, well, white lives matter too. And the thing is this, okay, agreed. Absolutely, you're right. Okay, you win. But in this time and where we're at right now, we have to remind ourselves of this systematic racism that exists in the United States. I read an article not long ago that the Bloods and the Crips, these LA gangs, basically were made by a thing called redlining. Certain people can only live in certain places. Does it still exist today? Yeah, I still think it does. Now, maybe it's not as systematic as in the system, but I can guarantee it's still there. All you need to do is talk to people who have stories that I've been heard lately about how when certain families go into a grocery store, how security follows them around the whole time, where security would never follow me around a grocery store. That's systematic racism. And I think we need to stop it, and I think we need to do a better job. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful about where we are right now. People are asking tough questions. People are going on the streets and peacefully protesting. Now, I said this the other day with a podcast with my friend Kelvin, that the camera loves the burning police car. The camera loves it. That's what people want to photograph. When my brothers were at San Francisco State, there was an anti-war rally on the campus, and it made national news. And my brothers came home from school. My mom said, "I'm so glad you're here. You're safe." And they said, "What are you talking about?" This huge riot happened on the campus. They didn't know about it because the camera loves those visions of the person bleeding, or the police officer arresting someone, or the person sprinting and throwing things. The camera doesn't love people walking down a street peacefully, asking for change, demanding change. So as we go through this time, I am hopeful. Like I told Kelvin the other day, it doesn't smell like it used to. It seems to be, we're moving now. It's not just words, words, words. We seem to be moving in a direction. Big questions are being asked. It's going to change the election this year. I'm hopeful, and I hope that all of you are safe. But remember, we've got to make a difference. The status quo cannot continue. Thank you.